Slay the Spire 2 is undoubtedly an amazing game, being bigger and better than its predecessor, which already is one of the greatest games of all time in my opinion. However, the amount of cards carried over from the first game got me thinking, which cards didn't come back? And more importantly, why? So I set out to try and answer this very question. It is important to note though, that this is just speculation. Game design is a very complicated and frankly subjective topic. Because of that, if you, yourself, have any of your own theories on any of these cards, I would highly encourage you to write a comment about it. I love talking about game design, and genuinely love to hear your takes. Also, this game is still in early access, and constantly getting updated, so some info might become outdated in the future. As for the cards we will be considering for this list, it is every card that isn't in the character's card pool in comparison to the first game. This means every card that either got removed, but also those available in a different way, like for example Shockwave being turned into a colorless card, or Clash being moved into an event-only card. So, without further ado, this is explaining every removed card from Slay the Spire 2. Part 1, the Ironclad. Beginning with Cleave. Cleave is a very good example of a removed card. It is a card with no real synergies or any cool effects, just being a simple AoE damage card. You could argue that this design decision is acceptable for the first game, since deck building roguelikes didn't really exist back then, and also with the Ironclad being the tutorial character, it kinda makes sense for him to just have a card that is so bare bones and simplistic. But I think once we get to the second game, there is no real reason for it to return. Additionally, something you will hear a lot in this video, the card would overlap too much with the role of another, new, most often better designed card. In other words, it got replaced by Breakthrough, with it also being a rather simple AoE damage common Ironclad card, but this time with actual synergies and interactions within the character's kit. Next up we've got Clothesline. I think this one comes down to class identity. It seems the devs decided that weakening should no longer be easy to access for the Ironclad, similarly to the Silent not having much vulnerable in her card pool. This change makes a lot of sense. I think it is way more flavorful for the Ironclad not to have weaken, with him already leaning heavily on vulnerable, being the sort of opposite of the Silent, while also having a sort of tank association, taking the full load of enemy attacks with either his block or his face, also having the lowest access to damage reducing debuffs in the entire game. Same logic applies to Intimidate and Shockwave, with the latter being turned into a colorless card, as a sort of replacement for Blind and Trip. This is because when it disassociated from the Ironclad, it very much feels like a generic anime effect that any class could do and benefit from, which I think perfectly exemplifies what a colorless card should be. Flex is a rather strange case. It is a massive fan favorite for new players, while also being kind of a bad card because it doesn't really do anything by itself. But if you were to buff it by just one number, then I feel like it would be way too broken. So the design of the card makes it very problematic to balance, with the concept of temporary strength being also really cool. So I think that the 3 reworks for it that are in the game were very well implemented. Setup Strike solves the issue of it being bad by itself, and also is way less polarizing as a card. Feeding Frenzy is an event-only card, and is allowed to get the +1 buff, and also Coordinate, which heavily rewards coordination with the party, on who currently has the most attacks to get the most use out of it. And it's almost never gonna be useless, since chances are someone is bound to draw some attacks. Warcry, I feel might be a card that got removed for being honestly a little bit too good. While in the first game, it was a pretty niche card, working with like Havoc, and hey, once in a blue moon you might actually use it for its intended purpose. It seems now that it would be an insta-pick in most exhaust decks, still having decent synergy with cards like Feel No Pain, but more importantly, fueling cards like Pact's End or Evil Eye, while being a card that does essentially nothing and costing nothing, not even a draw. Also, part of the Regent's identity now is put card on the top of the deck mechanic. The next card on the list is Wild Strike, which I'll be grouping together with Reckless Charge, Power Through, Fire Breathing, Evolution, and Immolate, which are all the cards that directly create or interact with status cards, as that whole archetype got moved to the defect. I think this decision comes down to the sheer amount of stuff the Ironclad has, with vulnerable stacking, playing a lot of attacks, strength, copious amounts of block, self-damage, exhaust, big attacks. With all these interacting and having synergy with each other in numerous ways, the card pool just doesn't have enough space for yet another archetype in it. Additionally, this playstyle was notoriously horrible, with wins being incredibly few and far between. On the other hand, some people might miss an entire archetype being removed from the game, and I think it makes perfect sense for the defect to have it instead. A literally defected, socially awkward robot breaking down mid-fight is so flavorful. Heavy Blade was a terrible card, especially standalone, and from what I can see, the devs removed it and panel because they wanted to get rid of cards that strongly benefit from strength that are, again, really terrible standalone, leaving really only one card in with Sword Boomerang that does that. And no, I'm not considering the Abomination. That card is getting changed, I am sure of it. I mean, hell, even the game itself mocks the card at one point. Another removed card, one that I miss a lot, is Blood for Blood. And I think for this card, the devs were scared of an uncommon card having too much payoff in self-damage builds. Its new contenders are Spite and Serra Sander, which are better designed cards in my opinion, although not by much. Interestingly, we saw this card in trailers just before the game came out. This must have been a very late call in the game's development. Now, back to a simpler pair, Carnage and Ghostly Armor. Got removed because ethereal cards are now a necrobiner mechanic. Interestingly, Ghostly Armor was also seen in the game's trailers, which, if I had to guess, was just a placeholder uncommon block card for the Ironclad's card pool while they were still developing his full kit. Next up is Combust, and like me, Combust, or should I say Inferno, transitioned into a way more functional, fitting, better, and cooler version of itself, while also changing their name. Good for them. This card sucked, and I think its buff is incredibly fitting and really cool, since payoffs for damaging yourself were always lacking in the first game. Also, Double Tap also technically got removed and replaced by 1-2 Punch, but I'm not really gonna mention it in this video since it's basically the same. It's literally the same card. I guess I'm mentioning it now. 1-2 Punch. This arm is an interesting case, because I feel like it might have been removed entirely because of multiplayer. Temporary strength down is already really good enough, and being able to reduce the enemy's strength permanently for every single one of your teammates with an uncommon card for one cost sounds way too good. It could also have something to do with the earlier described philosophy of the Ironclad having to rely only on his block and phase for defense and not debuffing enemies anymore as just a pure tank. Next on the list is Dropkick, and honestly, I'm glad this card was removed. Bully and Dismantle are infinitely cooler payoffs for the vulnerable archetype, and while yes, realistically the card isn't that bad, I've got personal beef with it, so I'm glad it's gone. Metallicized is, again, an interesting case. As stone armor, it's basically the same thing when looking at the philosophy of changing all instances of metallicized and plated armor in the game to plating. In the trailers, this card was shown to reduce your dexterity, which is why I think it was named stone armor. But with the current version, I think metallicized would fit better the card's flavor. I think it's also important to talk about why those two buffs got changed to plating. As for how I see it, it makes it way harder to feel like you're stuck in a fight because of not having enough offense, rewarding your defensive deck for staying alive as each turn the enemy has less and less defenses, while on the player's side, making it way harder to just turtle up and be safe forever. Some other changes that support this theory to try to make it basically impossible to be invincible forever are the removal of calipers in exchange for sturdy clamp, and the higher difficulty of getting permanent focus on the defect, making the famous E strategy way harder to accomplish. Now, let's talk about everyone's favorite event, the Trash Heap, which includes the ironclad cards, Dual-Wield, Entrench, and yes, of course, Flash. This is a pretty blatant way of the devs saying these cards were terrible, literal trash. Entrench seems to have been replaced by Indomitable, in my opinion, way healthier take on the idea. The overwhelming force of Clash forced many people, including me, to never pick it up, throwing it away while they're still not corrupted by its power. On the other hand, Dual-Wield is a strange pick for the event. The ability to duplicate certain attacks, and especially most powers, was a really powerful trait, with many players regarding the card rather highly. And while yes, juggling is a healthier take on the idea, it's still weird to see this card in the trash pile, especially in comparison to the other cards you can get there. My theory why it's in the event is because it's a rather underwhelming card for the early game, where you won't have many powers, if any at all, and maybe one attack that's sometimes worth duplicating. This gives the event a higher chance to give you something completely useless for the early game, in exchange for the gold that it gives you, which surprisingly doesn't apply to many cards in the event, with only Stack and Barricade being the other two notable standouts. Searing Blow, I think, is a card that should have been in the previously mentioned event. The problem is that it's one of the worst cards ever made from a balance standpoint, and the design isn't really much better. Its viability is completely dependent on when you get it. You could argue it has a little bit of synergy with armaments, but that is not a justifiable reason at all to keep it in the game. I think the concept of an infinitely upgradable card is inherently flawed with how the game balances giving you upgrade opportunities and encourages you to upgrade, with so many cards getting leagues better on upgrading them. Sever Soul feels like a very uninspired card, even for the first game, with Second Wind, Fiend Fire, and also now the newly added Soak being way cooler versions of exhausting your whole hand. It also seems to have been replaced with Cinder, also being a 2 mana, big damage, early game, exhaust card, which is a card that I also have problems with, but at least it's an improvement, and no, not right now. Singred is another really boring card. It already used to overlap heavily with Bloodletting, but it had some differences from it, especially considering the exhaust synergy. But now that Forgotten Ritual is there, for that exact purpose, and also another energy card was added, I feel like this card doesn't stand out enough to be in the Ironclad's arsenal anymore. Alright, Sentinel. In one of the first drafts of the script, I said that it could honestly be a card in the game, and then the devs changed Drum of Battle to be exactly that. Having the card draw instead of giving you block is a pretty smart change if you look at the exhaust package, since you often exhaust cards in your hand, and don't have anything left to play, and also having better strategy with corruption. I think the devs were testing around with exhaust payoffs and might have thought that having another one would have been too powerful for a card like Sentinel to exist, but then realized it's not and started to slowly buff the whole exhaust package. I personally found the exhaust package rather underwhelming at the start, so I'm glad they're buffing it. Spot Weakness is one of the cards that inspired this video's creation, and really made me think about the design of these both truthfully masterfully designed games. I probably should have said this at the beginning, but even though I might be saying a lot of bad stuff about the first game, that does not even compare to the stuff that was done hella right in it. There is a reason why most cards could have been carried over in one way or another. As for my theory on the card, I think it comes down to, as I like to call it, creating a critical mass of strength gain in the Ironclad's card pool, with cards like Brand, Bite Me, Rapture being an actually playable card that would make it way too easy to get way too many strength cards too consistently. Also, in comparison to those cards, Spot Weakness has flaws in design and flavor, since drawing it when the enemy is not attacking is kind of out of your control and always feels bad. And also the Ironclad doesn't seem like the brightest type to me that would just analyze the enemy in the middle of a fight. Now, finally moving onto the rare cards, we have Berserk. Just like the anime of the same name, this card was ass. This, even in the first game, was an infamous card that got buffed and reworked and buffed and changed and buffed so many times, only to still be at the rock bottom of almost all tier lists. The idea of giving yourself a debuff, granted, is cool as fuck, but I don't blame the devs for dropping this card, given how much of a failure it is. And the self-debuff mechanic works way better with Doom, in my opinion. Also, be honest with me, how many of you have thought of this card when you saw Pyre on your first run, about midway through Act 1? Brutality commits the sin of being an incredibly forgettable card. In fact, on the first draft of the script, I completely forgot about its sheer existence. The decision to remove it probably comes down to having another critical mass of consistent self-damage effects every turn, with the game only really needing 2, and with the newly introduced Crimson Mantle, you no longer really have space in the Ironclad's pool for the what was I talking about again? Axiom was, first of all, way too broken, but second of all, doesn't really fit anymore with what the Ironclad is trying to do with the exhaust archetype. The amount of cards exhausting themselves got reduced in favor of 4 cards that exhaust other cards, most often semi-random ones, with many cards rewarding you for having as many cards in your exhaust pile as possible, contradicting with what Axiom is really trying to do. Limit Break is a surprisingly decisive card. It's honestly kind of like drugs. You either pick it up every single time, facing the dopamine rush of 100 plus strength field, or try to live a normal, healthy life, realizing that you don't really need that ridiculous amounts of strength. Also, this card is sometimes really unfun to play since it's a dead draw if you draw it before your scaling cards, and oh boy, don't get me started on combining it with Flex. Now, getting 100 strength is really cool, so still living in a way to do it with Dominate and Molten Fists is a way better way to do it in my opinion, because Dominate is a card that can work well even without any support, after the buff it was given, that is. And now for the final removed card, Reaper got removed for being way too fucking broken. Having cards that heal you permanently is ironically, unhealthy for the game. And also, what are you doing here? Okay, you'll probably get removed next patch. Oh. You're staying. Okay, I'll explain why I think killing is bad when I get around to talking about Self Reaper, since Reaper is a card with completely different problems for me. The problem is that having a lifesteal on a card is pretty much impossible to balance in a game like Slay the Spire, especially on a class like the Ironclad that can increase the damage they deal to outrageous levels, with even the lowest damage cards with strength and vulnerable and many other things. It creates a play pattern that looks more like Gotham Ultra Kill, with your health bar being more erratic than the stock market for any AI related product. In a game where healing is supposed to be very hard to come by, and most often a sacrifice for something else. Granted, the idea is very cool and super flavorful, but it just sadly can't work in a game like this. And that will be it for today from me. Thank you for watching until the end of the video. This is my first YouTube video ever, so I hope you've enjoyed this, and if you have any feedback or want to say anything about the card, genuinely please tell me in the comments. I really want to know. I feel like the Slay the Spire YouTube sphere doesn't really have enough design analysis types of videos, which is a huge shame, especially considering how massively designed both of the games are. So if you want to see me continue the series, I would highly appreciate it if you could support this video with a like. It's just one click and also signals to me that yes, I should do the science because oh boy, I have some things to say. Also follow me on Twitch. There is like an 2% chance that I'll be playing Slay the Spire when I stream. And I think most people have clicked off at this point, so if you're still here, let me tell you a little secret. This mic is fake. It's not even connected to anything. That didn't sound good. Okay, bye!